For real, anyway. It's great to be here at this conference, this gathering of scholars and teachers from the HBCUs. I want to thank David for his invitation, Joy Fisher-Williams. It's good to see Nate telling everybody our age. Nate, good to see Nate. Teresa Red, who's helped me in the past on different things. I met a lot of people. I have a book of essays called Let's Flip the Script. Teresa organized that book for me. I had essays, they were scattered all over the place. Teresa said, no, you have to put this with that, and that has to go here. And so the final shape of the book is really what Teresa did back then. So appreciate her for that and over the years. And it's good to see some of my former students. I see at least 4 dissertations that I directed sitting out here in the audience. So that's good. So it's good to be at Howard. I've done a lot of research at Howard in Founders Library and around campus. And I probably have to do some more. I have a little bit of family history that's connected to Howard that I haven't pushed, but I might have to come back and research that. My uncle, who was the president of Howard University in the 60s, was James Nabert Jr. And James Nabert Jr. and my grandfather were best friends they were best childhood friends down in Georgia. And so what he convinced my grandfather to do was to name his firstborn son after him. So I have an uncle named James Nabert Lewis, and they always called him Nabert. His family is, my mother, his sister called him Nabert and all of that. And so I thought that was a funny name. It's like everybody said, hey, Nabert. I said, Nabert? What the hell? What kind of name is that, Nabert? So what I found out later when I got old enough to understand the story was that it was named after James Nabert Jr., who also named his own son James Nabert. So I think he was doing like George Foreman. He's just trying to get all these Georges in the world. So, and he wanted my uncle to come to Howard when he got older, but he didn't do it. I think he had to tell too much truth to come to Howard. My uncle was like the greatest liar in the world. So I couldn't, he'd have been a great composition student, just had to try to get him to tell the truth, But anyway, Howard evokes all that for me, so it's great to be back once again. And so I'll get into this talk, paying the price to make the mic sound nice. You would discern, and sometimes, I can talk and then I go way out here and then I pull it all back together, But I didn't think I was going to pull it back together today, so I just wrote it out. So stay focused, You would discern from my title that I am referencing a line by the Pepper MC from the tune My Mic Sound Nice. Her group, Salt and Pepper, was signed to a record label in 1985 and released their first album, Hot, Cool, and Vicious, the following year. That album includes My Mic Sound Nice, the tune that contains the lyric to which I have alluded. Pepper was launching her professional career at virtually the same time that I was completing my doctoral studies. I had paid the price throughout all of my formal schooling as a code-switching apprentice, trying to morph into a rhetorical power player. And in writing a dissertation on language learning in African Americans, I thought that my overall mic was sounding very, very nice indeed. So when Pepper boasted, I paid the price to make the mic sound nice, that resonated deeply with me. She was speaking of the maturation of a voice sure to mature even further, but one that had already reached the stage of competence to move people in a positive way. It was a voice of undeniable, negotiated presence. It was a voice of confidence. It was a voice persuasive enough to gain entry to sanctioned networks of communicators. It was a voice of mobility, even of nobility. It was a voice of assertion cast against boundaries. It was a voice, as my dissertation would have it, of the self. That existential echoing, I. I have not made any public comments about this song, Doctoral Studies Coincident, until now. You find no such reference in any of my scholarship. If it were there, your host, David Green, he would have found it. He's a great detective when it comes to my work. But on this occasion, I find myself revisiting that 1985 moment, that 1986 moment, to frame my remarks about culturally responsive pedagogy and the HBCU composition student. I will start with that I. It remains a useful concept even as we listen to many scholars inform us that our lives are socially constructed. And they most definitely are. But no two lives are constructed in precisely the same way. The social never reduces you to being someone else. So that I can be defined as the net result of the mediation of the social by an entity that we call a person. So while we acknowledge the social, we declare I to announce our variation. This is often a hard-won assertion, particularly for African Americans, given the legacy of a slavocracy inside of a democracy. Or perhaps it was the other way around. At any rate, this largely explains why personal narrative or autobiography is such a big part of the Afro-American literary tradition. With subjectivities and sometimes very lives having habitually to resist erasure, it is little wonder that our writers testified to being here by a disproportionate use of first-person techniques. I mean, we all know why the caged bird sings, don't we? We know why the caged bird sings, but we don't know it as Maya Angelou knows it. She has a special story for us. It is not titled, Social Construction Knows Why the Caged Bird Sings, but it is titled, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And it is not a mid or late career reflection, but a very first book, a bestseller by a 40-year-old writer who was relatively unknown before her formal literary debut. That impulse to self-expression that Angelou possessed and that we all share to some degree is what my colleagues and I made a cornerstone of writing courses at Syracuse University. As I have talked about often, we ran an initiative called the Odyssey Project, which featured the writing of student literacy autobiographies with the aim of having students clarify language perspectives to help guide them in their language development. Students also conducted ethnographic studies of language practices and produced critical papers to continue to sharpen and deepen their perspectives. Along with course activities, when the department sponsored events like workshops, panels, and films, the audience typically consisted of 50% of so-called minority students. This at a PWI where the so-called minority population was less than 15%. It was then, and Tyrone was there, he was there, and it was then within the context of our project that I became particularly interested in student literacy autobiographies because they seemed to be something more than worthwhile for all students. They seemed to be coping mechanisms for students of color to deal with their disidentification with the overall environment of a PWI, even as they matriculated. But there was no reason to restrict the analysis to those observations. It occurred to me, again, given the legacy of a slavocracy within a democracy, or the other way around, along with the consideration of the wellspring of our literary tradition, that dealing with disidentification and trying to grapple with itself in relation to that dynamic had to be crucial activities for many African American college students, regardless of the type of institution attended. So I'm thinking that these are crucial activities for students at HBCUs. Now, I cannot speak from the position of having attended an HBCU. I did not, unless the streets of Harlem and Corona count. And I suppose the case could be made. I have not taught at an HBCU, but did spend 14 years on the faculty at a PBI that was never anything other than a PBI. So why it is not universally designated as an HBCU is beyond me. In any case, it seems on reflection that much of what I was trying to do with student writers back then was similar, not just formulated as a program with what I later did at Syracuse. The point is that as I ruminate about that I I see it as an essential and rich field for HBCU writing students. I, HBCU writing student. I, HBCU writing student. Well, what could that mean? What particular student claims are the stitches to sew the factors that lead any particular seat in an HBCU writing classroom to the fabric of the future? Which puzzle is any one student to piece to complete? That's an interesting way to think about each student as the final piece of some puzzle. The final piece is, in fact, the most important piece. I know because it used to drive me crazy all the time. I would get a 200-piece puzzle and manage to assemble 199. I'd be looking under the couch cushions or in the trash can. I blamed the manufacturer for shorting me by one piece and tried to figure a way to get my money back. Then I'd find a piece in one of my shoes. Some of you know what that is all about. I, HBCU writing student, I cannot come close to unpacking on this occasion all of the implications of that seemingly simple statement. Right here at Howard University, one would only scratch the surface by contemplating connections among his or her family history to Howard University instructors Alain Locke, Sterling Brown, Alpheus Hunton, E. Franklin Frazier, and Toni Morrison, and to Howard University students and writers, Zora Neale Hurston, I.C. Davis, John Oliver Killens, Amiri Baraka, Lucille Clifton, Stokely Carmichael, taught by Morrison, B.B. Moore Campbell, taught by John Killens, and Ta-Nehisi Coates. A well-known maxim of education is that we should start with where the students are. I would refine that to suggest that we start with who they are. We know where they are in your class, right? But what intersections of realities are they that they can articulate? That is a promising place to begin. Moreover, pursuing a teaching strategy by a cohort of HBCU writing instructors that centers the autobiographical is going to lead, if proper research support is provided, to HBCUs producing some of the most captivating scholarship in composition studies. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. What if the Howard University students I mentioned above have been the objects of study for composition researchers? Speculate about those research reports, including longitudinal investigations. HBCUs were once at the forefront of modern composition studies. Nate talked about that. Check the history of the CLA. Check composition journals in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and the developments leading to the students' right to their own language resolution. HBCUs will lead composition studies and research along with PBIs, all right, some of which HBCUs, or they don't call them that. So, as I champion the exploration of that I, that brings me to the verge of conversations about cultural responsiveness. I would argue that the student-centered approach, or even better, community-centered approach, is necessarily culturally responsive given the social and political reference that must be part and parcel of any deep personal assessment. In short, I respect all cultural initiatives geared toward the intellectual and emotional health of students. However, I do not want to oversell the case. In other words, I want to leave some play in the terms responsive and relevance, because we never can totally ascertain in advance what students find motivational. We have models of whatnot, but we don't have any guarantees in advance what's going to move any particular student, much less a group of students. You can probably think of instances in your own lives during which you think, and this occurs sometimes, and you think to yourself, you know, given all this shade and hateration thrown my way, I should just clap back, and in clapping back, dead all that nonsense. That be the question, see? To clap back or not to clap back? Hamlet be relevant.
You contemplating what he contemplating, and maybe shaping your contemplation based on his contemplation. That's that Shakespearean twist that can get up inside you sometimes. That good old Shakespearean twist. You know, imagine being in love, but also having a rough time in other areas of your lives. That can happen, right? You be all in love, love's good, but everything else like rough kind of around you, kind of rough. So you covet the lifestyle of the rich and famous, or maybe the lifestyle of those you consider untroubled. But if the bargain for that other lifestyle is to trade in your loved one, you ain't going for it. Well, some of us ain't going for it. Some of us gonna make the trade, right? Just the mere memory of that love prevails over everything else. Well, that's Sonnet 29. That's Sonnet 29. Take Sonnet 29, send that in a time capsule to Motown. Let Smokey Robinson touch it up. Put that. So Smokey Robinson can put that quiet storm groove on it, you know? You know, for thy sweet love remembered, you know, he can put that quiet storm groove on it, something like that. So that's for other days. But the key thing for us at the present is that because good teaching will always be more art than science, as John Dewey knew, we use all of our multifaceted artistry to help students make that I manifest and even more sophisticated. Obviously, we would refrain from summary judgments too often found in the research literature, such as, quote, because you speak Ebonics, you this way. Or, quote, because you don't speak much Ebonics, you aren't much that way. Obviously, we would not get stuck on that as our students work on that I. Is my mic sound the better choice, or is my mic sounds the better choice? Answer, depends on the context. I need some water. Now, paying the price is, of course, inextricable from the development of that I. It is an aspect, as I have suggested, of how that I develops. But for conceptual convenience, let's separate the two for a moment. That I being a person at a particular stage, and paying the price being those costs that one has to fork over to be the writing boss. Those costs include working through doubts, testing oneself in the rhetorical schoolyard, falling and rising, accepting criticism, putting in the work to push through barriers, heightening perceptiveness, becoming adept at self-awareness and self-evaluation, and discovering one's politics and purpose. Pepper paid. Maya knows. I graduated. All of this done in relation to curriculums and extracurriculums, which can be conceived of, as I have indicated, quite expansively. All kinds of writing prompts exist. For example, thinking of specific HBCU matters, I recall the career of Louise Thompson Patterson, something that I have researched extensively. In the 1920s, as a young woman, she taught at Pine Bluff Agricultural, Mechanical, and Normal School, now the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and at Hampton Institute, now Hampton University, both HBCUs. During both stints, she noticed the mostly conservative nature of the institutions, the rigid disciplining of students, and the paternal attitude of white trustees. In each instance, she resisted. She did her best to teach subject matter, but also tried to spark critical consciousness in her students, and certainly fostered such a disposition when it revealed itself. Louise, in fact, was way ahead of the Odyssey Project, though a bit more prescriptive when she taught a summer English course for a group of in-service teachers at Pine Bluff. As she recalled, this is Louise writing, the first day I asked them to write a short autobiography. I'm like, what, 1927? That's what I did in 97, you know, 70 years ahead of what I was talking about. So the first I asked them to write a short autobiography. When I began correcting their papers, I found them on about the level of my regular students. Their grammar, spelling, and vocabulary were identical. I found out from their papers that many of them had only a 4th grade education and got their positions teaching by bribing their local White County school boards out of their meager pay of $40 a month. So all I had to do was haul out a grammar, a spelling book, a dictionary, and we had the beginning of a wonderful 8 weeks. End of quote. Part of the experience was that the students, eager to learn, often visited their instructor's home to continue lessons. Louise was also at the center of the famous Hampton student strike of 1927. A wave of protests had occurred on HBCU campuses in the spring of 1927, led by students who had some of the same issues that Louise saw, right? They wanted educational upgrades and fairer treatment. At Hampton the following fall, core groups of student activists began protesting in earnest on Sunday, October 9th. They refused to stand for ROTC inspection or to sing grace at meals. At the Sunday Vesper service, featuring a guest, Sir Gordon Guggisberg, Commander-in-Chief of the Gold Coast, who was on hand to observe educational methods, the students refused to sing and left the auditorium. President James Edgar Gregg suspended classes the next day, but conducted meetings with students who subsequently elected a 20-member student protest committee and boycotted classes, but agreed to return if Gregg seriously addressed their concerns. Instead, Gregg imposed a lockout. Louise became an unofficial advisor to students, particularly the females. She also sought the advice of Alain Locke and W.E.B. Du Bois, traveling to Washington and New York, respectively. Back at Hampton, she wrote to Du Bois with her assessment of the situation. It was a lituation, as the young folks say today. You know, it was irreversibly lit, you know. Now, Du Bois eventually published excerpts from Louise's remarks, which were unequivocally supportive of the students. Always a writer, she wrote, quote, "Very much depends on public opinion in this affair. The authorities are crediting this strike as the work of disobedient boys and girls who were led on to do what they did. On the other hand, each student I have talked with has impressed me with the serious attitude he has taken in this matter. With each one of them, it became a holy cause. The strike to them was not a prank. In fact, it was partly forced on them. But when they found themselves too deeply involved to back out, they went ahead with great religious fervor." End of quote. Unfortunately, support was thin overall. Parents, alumni, and the black media generally lined up on the side of the administration. By the time Gregg officially reopened campus on October 25th, he had expelled or suspended 69 of Hampton's best students and placed hundreds more on probation. He completely neutralized the school's current student leadership. As for Louise, President Gregg made it clear that he did not want her at the school, but he did not terminate her employment. In fact, he eventually extended an offer for the following academic year. Louise chose to leave, but her presence as a faculty member who challenged white paternalism signaled a major change in Hampton's culture. The following year, amid renewed student protests, President Gregg was dismissed. Louise and student activists left Hampton Institute and other HBCUs better off than they found them. And that achievement has reverberated through time. Social progress is hardly ever straightforward. There are inevitable setbacks. But as historian Thomas Holt noted in an essay, The Black Struggle for Literacy, those struggles in the 1920s laid the basis for the crucial civil rights activism of the 1950s and 1960s, because the transformed HBCUs were the most important institutions, along with black churches, for the success of the civil rights movement. Though several generations of activists, as Carmen Kennard has pointed out in her book, Vernacular Insurrections, also were the main agents who brought modern composition studies into existence. Their insistent call to democratize higher education led directly to the creation of composition programs nationally. Some of those activists from the 60s are now in their 60s and older. They are grandparents of today's HBCU students. They have passed the baton, at least regarding the student phase of their lives. And the question for today's students is exactly what do they stir up as they encounter college and then move past the Bush, Obama, and Trump eras into the second quarter of the 21st century. Now, students need not remain locked in the research archives, as I often have been, as they ponder these weighty possibilities. A popular text, we saw a presentation, we're using popular text in the classroom. A popular text like the movie Black Panther could be the centerpiece of a program of study. I should have been on that last panel. I could have unfolded it. I don't have time. Rhetoric, poetics, politics, technology, you can get it all in. Just gauge the various reactions of your friends and colleagues to this blockbuster, and you will see what I mean. Some of my own friends are upset that Killmonger is the stereotype of the thuggish African-American male. Even grooming at Annapolis and MIT does not refine him. I argue is that he is not merely a thug, and I add that I like that he is unreconstructed, that his rage, which is largely righteous, is too powerful to be watered down simply because he can excel within institutions of the dominant culture. My appreciation for the aesthetic requirements of a truly sinister and genius villain outweigh on this occasion my concern with nice, neat, respectable representation. But our disagreement is going to go back and forth before we resolve it or just agree to disagree. Some of my friends think that the film is not subversive enough. That's what Earl said. They think that an alliance should be formed between T'Challa and Killmonger so that they could, in tandem, transform the world order. That's not a bad ending, though not a satisfactory one, to my sense of the epic, dramatic, and the tragic, right? Some of my friends read the film as a rendering of a Malcolm versus King dispute, with the world house, vibranium-sharing king emerging as triumphant. The nationalists don't like that, right? But even the World House people are not too eager to hand over vibranium to the white folk. Some of my friends simply pine for Wakanda of the mind. I get it, a place of presumed empowerment. In the meme that I saw, you can get a jet from Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta and fly straight on over there. I am in no hurry, but I do not yearn for a monarchy. M'Baku and the Jabari tribe do not seem to have fared all that well under a monarchy, and I am sensitive to M'Baku's critique. There is generosity in some of T'Challa's latter gestures, but no offer of democracy. He ain't running for president. He the king. Everyone I know loves the women. You know, I love the women myself, right? Shuri, Okoye, Nakia, whoo! They stole the show. So, discussion ensues about why such major displays of beauty, brilliance, technological wizardry, skill, and fortitude by black women are still surprising in a Hollywood film. And then there are the reflections about the racial climate of Hollywood, the decision-making, the exclusions, and then the musings about the career, a spectacular one so far, of director Ryan Coogler. It is not hard to support someone who managed this effort and previously wrote and directed Fruitvale Station, a film about the murder of Oscar Grant, by a BART police officer. We should talk about that film more. In addition to the overt and politically charged responses, there are all of the apparently apolitical ones that can be teased out later. I watched Black Panther while seated next to the 11-year-old son of a friend and colleague in my department. When it was over, I asked him how he liked it. He said with the pre-adolescent authority, all the pre-adolescent authority that he could muster, best movie ever. Imagine the curriculum, therefore, spurred by Black Panther, which incorporates engagement of rhetorical criticism, of nationalism versus integrationism, of Malcolm and King, not Malcolm versus King. Imagine a curriculum that incorporates discussion of forms of government, of forms of political economy, of gender roles, of the relation of art to other everyday concerns, of the racial implications of technological advances, of the career trajectories of Black cultural workers, and of art for art's sake discussions. And there is much more. This is, matter of fact, this is where the Bedford St. Martin's people might fit in. They can sign and support some of you to do a casebook and invite you to oversee the development of a website and or app that demonstrate and delineate the prospects for Black Panther in the writing classroom. I would go down, if I was Bedford St. Martin, I'd go down to Morehouse because they're already doing this type of stuff. That's a natural fit right there, you know. So the price then, the price can involve a series of pedagogical experiments and interventions. The price could be a rich mining of the Black freedom struggle. HBCUs are tied tightly to this struggle. The price could be the trying on of a variety of authorial garb. The price could be political action. At times, protest is not simply part of education, it is the education. Writing and otherwise. Paying the price is that I getting in command of curriculums from the student end. Thus, as I begin, I'm gonna wrap it up, I don't wanna go too long, but thus as I begin to wind up by emphasizing two aspects, I wanna emphasize two aspects of a progressive pedagogy. One, the rigorous democratic development of that I, that enabling constellation. And two, the dedicated written exploration of the social and political worlds that students inhabit. Those are the pathways. That's the ascent to the mic, that's the ascent to publications, that's the ascent to degrees. All of these accomplishments can be marked succinctly, boldly, and resoundingly by that victorious cry, I paid the price to make the mic sound nice. As for recognizing when the mic sound nice, I'm going to leave that to your talents and sensibilities. You got this. You have to be the nimble orchestrators of the processes for turning out the next generation of rhetorical power players, the people I aspired to be like. You have the ears for rhetorical effectiveness, for verbal skill, for masterful performance. You may recognize the effects the way Pepper describes them. She say, room temperatures reach 104. I say, that's hot. The ideas are crackling. The language must be popping. She say, the pressure soars. I say, the audience is really revved up. She say, the crowds, they roar. She say, sweat will drip down to your drawers. Thank you. Thank you, Nate. Thank you. Thank you.
be scared.
Would you like to come to one of our schools and teach sometime?
Y'all should have got me this semester. I was on sabbatical this semester. I could have gone any place this semester. I hope so. I also be glad to do it. Okay. Yeah, we can talk.
Sound good?
Yeah, I even give you the Negro price. Yeah. You don't need that. All right. Okay.
I'm impressed with the level of scholarship that you've done in this area, but it doesn't seem there don't seem to be many opportunities for scholarship on composition and African American English composition.
You mean outlets for publishing it or doing it?
Well, there's just not much out there, or either there's not much opportunity. I'm not sure, but there's a dearth of information and books similar to what you're doing.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me in the back? It's on. Yeah. I think it's a lot of. I mean, we come into this field like we first and second generation scholars in this field. I'm following behind, as Nate mentioned, I'm following behind people like Geneva Smitherman. She passed the baton to me and some other people. I'm trying to pass the baton on to the next generation. I think there are opportunities. I think that, like I said, I think what has held back research in HBCU context has been the support. You know, a lot of those scholars, even back when we were starting the Black Caucus and things like that inside 4Cs, a lot of those contributors were from HBCUs. Geneva got a lot of love, but she wasn't at HBCU. She was at Harvard. She was at a place where she could do the writing, but a lot of people were doing the work also, and she's always giving credit to those people who, because of heavy teaching schedules, couldn't do the work she was doing. So I think the opportunities for research today, I think the question is aligning support mechanisms with the researchers who would do the work. I mean, you're out here, other people are out there. There are plenty of brains out here now. It used to be you can count them up. You know, there's a lot of brains out here now that can do the research. So I think opportunities there, and I think that the publication venues, we force those open. I mean, we've always had to do that. You know, I don't know that anything we've ever done in our long history of struggle is about we waited for the door to open, right, and then we went in. We say there's no opportunities to do this, so no, we make opportunity. You know, we make a way out of no way, right? That's our tradition. But I think the outlets are there. I think good, solid research. I think presses are interested in that. If you can make the case, it's like anything else. I mean, if you can make the case, the publishers will listen, your journals will listen. They don't always listen, but they'll listen sometime. They'll listen enough for you to be in there. Matter of fact, we've been in there for years. You know, we've been in there for years. Go back and check the journals. We're in there, right? So I think there are opportunities. There could be more, obviously. Right. There's more to do, but I think that's on us. That's on us to form the network. Some of the consortiums, all these university presses, you know, they all have series. You know, so at every major university press, how come we're not sitting there running the series on composition? We complain about who else is the series editor. You could be the series editor. And you could sign it. You could be the series editor and sign up a number of composition books on composition, HBCU students, African American language, whatever. So I think opportunities are out there. It's about networking. It's about organizing and networking. That's the power that we always have, the power to organize. As Marcus Garvey said, organize, organize, organize. That's what we got to do.
Curious. So you talked a lot about progressive pedagogy, and so I'm kind of like borrowing from Carnegie Woodson about the idea of like history just for the sake of information, you know, like not just imparting information on students. So when you think about the like rhetorical grounding and possibilities that you gave, like answer, how can instructors think about that responsibly beyond just a moment of popularity or just like a temporal moment of like this is hot right now? How can you handle all those multiple possibilities responsibly in the classroom so that it's not only engaging for the student but communicating?
Yeah, I think I'm not quite understanding what you mean by responsibly, but I suppose you mean do it well. Yeah. I guess. Yeah, I mean, you know, all this stuff is fodder. You know, I don't make an argument that you have to go home and try to develop a curriculum model around Black Panther, but you can. You see, so I think it's not the. I think this is what the panel that Nate and what's the sister Clark? What's the first name again? I forget. Tanya Clark and Professor Kumar. I think that's what they were articulating. They weren't making any case that you had to use this material. The case they were making is about the engagement with that material, right? Using it to construct, for their purposes, they constructed certain rubrics and other things for their students at their location, at their particular site. I'm not a do this, do that type of person because A, I don't work where you work, and I don't visit all the places, and I don't know all the students that you know, right? So I'm not, that's why I never like to come in, you know, do a workshop real quick and get the next jet out of town. I really don't do that. You know, like what the sister asked me, what about a semester? I like that, right? You get a chance to be on the ground and see what you're dealing with, right? And how you're dealing with them and how they're dealing with you. So I don't think the question is ever about, oh, you mentioned that, so how do I go home and, that's on you. I can't teach you to drink responsibly or teach responsibly. You know what I'm saying? Responsibility. I'm just saying, you know, responsibility thing on you, you know. I was throwing some ideas out there for possibilities of engagement. I gave a whole list of things you could incorporate in a curriculum around issues that come up in a film like that, or in any film, you see, or in any film, so. I mean, I don't want to be flip or anything, but I'm just saying, you know, yeah. Yes, Andrea.
I want to go back to your response to the first question, and that was person talking. I just wanted to reiterate about the formation of D-Black, because that network is intended, if I'm understanding it correctly, to support and encourage and nurture opportunities for research and publication among students, graduate students of color, and then young faculty members of color. When I think about the people that are in this room right now, the talent.
Oh, lots of talent. That's what I said. They got it. I was saying, they got this.
Yeah. Coming out. And when I think about Jackie Royster, Shirley Wilson Logan, Beverly Moss, Elaine Richardson, I mean, we have got riches to draw on that we've been learning from. So I do think, just to underscore your response, there is opportunity, never enough, but the voices of these cells are coming.
Right, no doubt. Yeah, for you to know, I was on the liaison to 4C's executive committee 1 year. I came in under Andrea, so I just wanted people to know that. She's a mentor too, as well. Yeah. Stop saying that. Yeah. Yes, Karen.
This kind of goes back to the first question when you talk about the opportunities for publication, and I agree with you. I think they're there. We were just kind of joking, but it's a joke, but it's real. But the time is.
That's the issue.
Mentioned it in his presentation. You have like 4 loads, and then you have 1 million committees, and you have however many students in your class, and then you're like an event planner. Now I'm going on there. Or your university's Founders Day, or your program about that. And you're writing and the writing studio, and you're writing across the curriculum, and you're trying to get tenure. And then you might want to have a life, right? So you might want to sleep, you might want to eat. So I think, I know for me, and I would say perhaps for some others too, we probably have a lot of unwritten articles and ideas in our heads, and it's like, when is there the time? We don't have sabbaticals, so that's like the early myth. I was a TA in graduate school, but I've never seen one for myself.
I get it.
And so I know it's kind of like a venting a little bit, but and I talk with other scholars of how to try to articulate it so it doesn't seem like we're just venting, but these are real issues that I think prevent a lot of us from being out there publishing in the way that we would like to be, or being at conferences because travel funds are limited and those kinds of things. So those are real tangible barriers, and so.
But that's why I qualified. That's why I said I qualified and said, first I said the statement straight then are qualified instead with proper research support. Because you have to have that. You have to have people. A lot of times, I think deans and administrators, they like to look good. I think we have to figure out ways to frame, because I don't think we're just going to do a frontal assault and knock down and get travel funds unbridled and all that. We have to find ways to construct arguments that make them look good, and we try to do the thing like that. But I know exactly what. I mean, I didn't publish. Let's say I spent 14 years at a PWI. Our travel budget was $75 a year for faculty, and they used to divvy that up. And try to get your $75 to go to the C's, and they say, oh, the money's already spent for the year and all that kind of stuff. We didn't even get the $75 half the time. I didn't start publishing until I was coming up on 40. Voice of the Self came out when I was 39. I mean, I wasn't publishing. I was there for years. You don't go back and see me in no composition scholarship during that period of time that I was in New York. I knew Nate. That's about all. That was my outlet. So I get it. So it's one of the reasons. Again, I didn't want to. I was conflicted about leaving the school in Brooklyn, but I eventually decided to leave because I knew that I had to get a different work setup in order to get some of all the ideas I had in my head out. Because what you fundamentally realize as a researcher, as a writer, is that we talk about our time and whatnot. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about your time. They don't. So you're the only person. You're the only person that can make it sacrosanct and try to get something done that you can get done. But no, you will not have. And I'm the first to say, if you're still in that environment, you cannot have the same research output as you can in other environments. So these are very, very real concerns that you articulate. I've lived it and get it. Yeah.
We got time for one more question. I want to get Temptations in the back.
I'm glad you are actually speaking on some of the editing things. So I'm not at that faculty point yet. We'll be there pretty soon. But I'm thinking about all the publishing thing, and I noticed as you speak, you do a lot of signposting and kind of supporting of some of your cultural references, but you don't do it for all of the cultural references. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking some of that is probably a trick to you saying that you're a rhetorical power player.
Trying to be.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to lead into is like, how did you get to a point in your writing and your publishing where you're deciding what cultural references you're going to unpack for your audience? Because I think that's something I'm really struggling with in my writing, where at this PWI, I'm doing this writing and I'm making cultural references, and oftentimes they're like, what is trap music? Breaking it down. Mm-hmm. But if, like if I say something like the statement was, trap music is inherently black. But that's not gotten. But if I say country music is inherently white, it's like, oh yeah, of course. So I'm just trying to how are you doing that signposting? Or when are you deciding when to let them do the labor of the cultural reference, and when are you actually willing to do that labor in your writing?
And tell the truth, I don't know. No, I'm saying what it is. It's your internal, it's your internal mechanisms that we develop over time as writers. I've been writing almost every day for over 60 years. So it's just practice. You try things. That's part of it. Yeah, but some of it is imagining your sense of audience. This is all the stuff we talk about. We're working on with students, right? Trying to get them to develop a sense of audience. But when you have a sense of audience, then you're asking those questions of yourself. Like, so you say, if I say that, given who I might be speaking to, or that might not play with them unless I unpack it. So you're developing a sense about that, but there's no formula for that. Like with somebody, what would be good if somebody should study me, and then they'd say, how he be doing that? It's like studying, because I'm not in total command of my processes, and I can't tell you everything I'm doing. Some of that's internal. I don't verbalize it all and can't tell you, I can't come back and say, well, I did this for this reason and for that reason, blah, blah, blah. But if you did a little ethnographic study or something on me, you could unpack some of that. You could unpack some of that.
That's a part of my pushback. I'm saying, I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of explaining it. I've gone through my whole career of having to look up every cultural reference.
Yeah, but the thing is, look at your audience. So you go in, you said, I ain't gonna explain nothing to y'all. I ain't explaining none of my cultural references to y'all. So then you give your whole talk and they don't know what you're talking about. So you win and lose, you know. Y'all a great crowd.
We are about at time, but Dr. Spencer, we wanted to get your question in.
Oh, I was talking about my comment, and I guess what I wanted to say in response to what Karen talked about, etc. When we talk about getting our work out, the fact is that there have been those of us who work in this context, even with all those things, who've done it. And part of the idea for and the need for what we're doing today and tomorrow is for us to talk to each other and find out from each other how you did it. Because some of us have and have done it consistently. And we just haven't had an opportunity to share how we've done it. Because for me, I did a lot of that work in those environments, and then there are other HBCUs like NCAT who will give you a 3 load. And when I arrived at NCAT, and they said, oh, you know, you only have to teach 3 this, I said, y'all got it easy. Because I was used to the 4-4, sometimes 5-5, you know, or 4-5, whatever. Even in and then 3 in the summer. You know, I've done that and gotten stuff out. Now, everybody can't do that, but we, by talking to each other, perhaps we could glean out how it's been done and how this person did it, and maybe we can come up with ways to work together. It has to be a cooperative kind of thing. I can't tell you how to do it, but I can tell you how I did it. And take from it what you did in your context. So that's one of my, one of the thought processes behind the need for this kind of gathering and the need for this to continue. Because we've done a whole lot of stuff individually. But if we want to make a bigger impact, you gotta share, and we gotta do this together. And that's what we're about, and I think that's what we need to look forward to as we go in the future with these kinds of gatherings. You know, let's talk to each other about how we did it, and then maybe it'll be an article or a book about how to do it in this context.
Might be a movie. You know, I taught a 5-5 while I was in grad school with 5 kids and a pregnant wife. Mine is a movie. Mine is a movie.
So we're about at time. Please join me in giving our keynote.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you to everyone that came out today, and for those of you who stayed the entire day. You got the soldiers. Hopefully you'll be back tomorrow morning, ready to do it again with our second keynote. Let's end it there.
Okay, so that was good, man. That's fun. That was all right. I ain't mess you up, did I? Last minute joint. You know, that's last minute joint. That's the best I could do. I ain't dicing. I had to come in last minute. But that's the best I could do. It was all right, cool.